We have two interesting plants to look at in this location, but let's start with the shrub. This shrub is called dogwood, and there are many different species of dogwoods. This plant is interesting for many reasons, but let's start with its name. The dogwoods have nothing to do with dogs at all. The name dogwood actually comes from the word dagger. Dagger, D-A-G-G-E-R. So a dagger is like a spear, and people use the stems of dogwood to spear things like their food generally. Now, if you're going to use this plant to roast your marshmallows, you might want to make sure that you are really picking a dogwood instead of a different type of stem, because some plants are poisonous. So it will be really good to be able to identify this dogwood with certainty so you know you weren't using a poisonous plant. Now, a friend of mine says the best way to recognize a dogwood is by its bark. I get it. It's a joke. There aren't very many botanical jokes. But I already told you that the name dogwood has nothing to do with dogs. Okay, so how are we going to recognize this plant for real? Well, there's a really cool way. So pull a leaf off of the plant. So if you take that leaf and very carefully tear across it, you can see I started to do that here. Carefully tear across, and there are little fibers that will hold those leaf pieces together. You can kind of see one down here. And if you tear across it really carefully, you can tear it so that the leaf will actually have a space. It'll separate, and those fibers will hold it together. So you can tear that leaf apart and still have it connected. It's kind of amazing. You can see all the way through it. And there aren't very many other plants that will do that, but dogwood will for sure. So that's how you can tell that you're actually using a dogwood stem if you're going to use it for a marshmallow roast to make your s'mores. If you want to pause here for a minute and see if you can tear a dogwood leaf, that would be great. All right, remember I said there were two plants here, so now we're going to go down on the ground and look at the second one. So you're going to have to get right down on the ground and look really close, because this is a tiny little plant. It's called a field pansy. So get right down and look really close into those little flowers. They're really cute. Now the name field pansy for this comes from the fact that this was found in cultivated fields. So most people would call this a weed. You may know pansies, the larger pansies that people plant in the springtime. You may have seen those. But I think these little wild ones are just beautiful. So take a close look at it, and you can see that in this pansy, just like in the larger, more cultivated ones, there's some little lines. See these little lines in here? They kind of look like whiskers. If you think of a pansy as like a face, these are like little whiskers in there. What do you think those are for? What do you think is the function of those little whiskers? If you want to pause here for a minute and think about it and talk it over, that would be great. So what did you come up with? Well, when you're thinking about the function of things in flowers, especially flowers that look pretty, you want to be thinking about insects. And so these little lines here are like little arrows or road signs for the insects that come in and pollinate these plants. If you sit there and watch long enough, you may see a bee come in, and they'll actually use these little arrows here to know, or to help know, that right in the middle, that's where they can go to find the nectar. And that's also where they'll get pollen on them somehow, and then they'll carry that pollen to a different flower. So as you're walking along the trail and you look at the flowers, what you might think about as you look at them is, what are the features that I see here that are especially helpful for insects that are looking for nectar and pollen? Hope you enjoy your walk along the trail and see lots of other flowers.